Greetings, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today we have our friend Rand from Arizona. He's not a podcaster, not plugging any books or anything, just a regular person. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers to come and share their stories with us. Get a t-shirt, coffee mug, buy me some whiskey for gaming. Amazon wish list down there for a new video card would be nice if you want to be that kind of a benefactor. Also, 15 currently available works of historical dream literature. And of course, my personal website, BenjaminTheDreamWizard.com. That's enough shilling for myself. Back to our friend Rand in Arizona. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm sorry about the airplane going overhead.
Oh, probably I talked over it and it wasn't even noticeable. So that shit happens. I've had worse technical glitches. You can't interrupt shows. One of the recent episodes was this gal had a webcam, and for some reason, I don't know if it was on my end or on her end or the interaction of our two technologies, she had these green cubes on the screen where she is like herself repeated in two corners. It's like she had backup dancers
Cool.
mirroring. It was actually kind of cool. I mean, it was annoying and we wanted it to stop, but we couldn't figure it out. So, a plane going by is like, no big deal. So we were talking a little bit just briefly before we started about you, and that's one thing I like to do in terms of, and I've gotten better at that. Sometimes I'm like all business, like straight to the dream, let's go. But lately it's been like, okay, there's a purpose to actually talking to someone in terms of, I think I get a better understanding from the dreams if I actually talk to people and kind of say, well, where are they coming from, what's their vibe, and just let the conversation be natural and see what it is. But so you did say you were going to school.
Yeah, I'm currently going to ASU, finishing a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics and a minor in physics.
Very cool.
And then whenever I have free time or whenever it's not 100 and some odd degrees outside, I do quite a bit of landscape photography.
Right on. Good deal. So you've got like a educational or career focus and also a passionate hobby. Those things are great. I mean, sometimes you get to be like me and it's the same thing. I want to make this my career and it's a passionate hobby. So I call myself a wizard. I mean, it's branding, but it's also an archetypal conceptualization I'm trying to live up to in a sense. It's a role I've decided to take on, like, a postman delivers the mail. No one's born a postman necessarily. It's a job you can take on, a role you can embody that accomplishes a specific purpose. So that's kind of how I conceptualize being a wizard in that sense. So I call myself a wizard, the wizard of words, maybe in that way. And I refer to folks like you, like my dad has a degree in engineering. And he uses that to design towers and bridges and things like that, engineering stuff, structural engineering. I refer to folks like him and you as mathemagicians. That is a talent I do not have.
Well, I'm hoping that I can I can do both at the same time, where I can take photographs of mathematical things
Oh,
and then
yeah.
explain them through math in a certain way. Because there's a whole branch of simulated physics that is trying to simulate real world events, but they need reference footage for that and stuff like that.
Neat. Yeah. And I mean, at the very least, every picture in your school math books was taken by someone for that purpose to illustrate
Yeah.
some principle. Makes me think of folks who've done the pictures of, say, a Nautilus shell, and then they show how it fits with the Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. Is that the kind of thing that inspired you to think it was possible to combine the two?
Um, it was more that I had always wanted to do photography since I was little,
Mm,
and then um, the thing that I was particularly good at was math. And so growing up, I was like, why can't I just do the both of them at the same time?
for sure.
There's nothing barring the two from being together. If
Yeah.
speaking English and speaking French together can get you a job, and they're completely different languages.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I know. I see a tremendous potential for that. And for expanding it too. Like you might find new ways to do it that no one's done before. That's the kind of fun part I like is how do we make this something unique? put my own
There's
stamp on it.
also a lot of math behind the manufacturing of cameras because you're trying to get as much light onto a sensor as possible,
Yeah,
as accurately as possible.
that is heavily physics. I mean, that's all physics. We
Yeah.
found it. That's the invention of stuff is like that blows my mind too because we had, if you go way, way, way back, the wheel, the lever. I mean, these very simple things are the principle of water displacement and volume. We observed these natural phenomena, and then we started to understand how they work in a way. And then there's that moment of epiphany. Like I was thinking, I was editing one of my books last night, and I came across Archimedes, and he's the guy that found out. He gets in his bathtub, and the water level goes up. He's like, "There's the same amount of water in here. What happened?" I happened. It came to his mind. I added my volume to the water, and it raised the level. The Newton, the possibly apocryphal story of Newton getting hit in the head with an apple, or at least watching an apple fall from a tree he's sitting under. These moments that's what I refer to as magic. Not in the spooky woo sense, but whoa, what is this? I thought I turned this thing off. Sorry. Yep, we got the comedy show playing in the background. I listen to, speaking of sleep and dreams, I listen to stand-up comedy when I go to bed. That's my little decompress, take my mind out of my mind and focus on something else. So I was going somewhere with that. Maybe you had something to respond.
Forgot whatever it was going to be.
Oh yeah, I talk too much. Sorry. No, but oh yeah, I was saying about magic, like that moment of discovery. Like there's the, it's the famous, and it's on our money in America. It's the pyramid with the eye above it, or the flame. And so you've got this pyramid of knowledge in a way, and that's a great way to conceptualize it. You've got the foundational stuff that you build upon, and you learn more and more as you refine and narrow your focus. And then there's a gap. The flame doesn't actually touch, or the all-seeing eye doesn't actually touch the pyramid. Something magical happens in that gap that then produces the epiphany. And it's almost impossible to manufacture. You can kind of set yourself up by aiming in a particular direction, but you can't guarantee that by following a specific process, you will have epiphany as a necessary consequence of it. So whatever allows us to have a new idea, whatever a new idea is, I think that's magic in my mind. So yeah. Anyway, you got some friends in the background?
Oh, yeah, just being outside. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. It's perfectly fine. I didn't know if someone was talking to you. I'm okay to sometimes you got to say hi to somebody real quick or discuss something. What do you want for breakfast? I'm cooking. Yeah. It's not a big deal. I like the background though. I like, not many folks I talk to are outside or have greenery in the scenery.
Yeah, no, I had to find a spot that was nearby where I could. So then when I leave, I can actually just get to class.
Get up and go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. How far along are you in the classes? Still early couple years or finishing towards the latter third year, fourth year?
Third year with about a semester and a half.
Okay.
So I have like one semester and then two research papers.
Gotcha.
And so it's going to be a semester of just research papers at the very end.
Yeah. Well, you gotta find a way to say, okay, demonstrate you've learned something. Show us you can apply the principles and, come up with something new in a way, or at least a new way of looking at something or your own way of phrasing something.
Yeah.
Do you already have an idea for your capstone project or whatever? Have you formulated something, or you're still kind of looking for suggestions or inspiration?
I'm currently thinking about water physics for my
Speaking of
physics paper
Archimedes, yeah.
and mathematics. Either something to do with light or something along those lines, but I'm not entirely sure or statistics because stats is also um, is the thing that I've taken the most classes on so far.
Okay. That was something I was never good at. I can't math. I learned that at an early age. I peaked out at like the beginning levels of algebra. I'm like, no, equations, forget it. Sets
My
and fractions, and I can't wrap my head around it. I'm glad you can. I mean, we need mathematicians and engineers and physicists. Something I can't do.
My mom did fine in geometry, but the moment that they added algebra to it, my she just like completely failed that multiple years in a row.
Me too. That's exactly where I cap out. I kind of get geometry. I get it. It's a physical object. There's something about, you've got a square, but then you add sides to it. You got a box. You can make a cylinder. I can see 3D shapes. I can understand the a squared, b squared, c squared for the right triangle. I make things with my hands sometimes out of wood. I can get that. I can make a mitered corner that it looks good on a picture frame, that kind of a thing. But yeah, no, you start adding algebra to it, like, beyond me, beyond me. It's good. Could never get
Oh,
it.
when I was little, I used to do a bit of woodworking, and then I would, when we first learned geometry, I would dream in shapes instead of my normal dreams for like the longest time. And so instead
Interesting.
of like normal dreams, it would just be the shapes.
Wow. That's a pretty cool experience. I don't know that I've ever had someone mention that or inspire a thought in me in that way of, it makes sense that if you're studying something and really processing it in your mind, that if you haven't finished processing it, naturally it carries over into dreams very often. Mostly dreams, probably we don't remember. But you do remember shape dreams as you were really literally in a sense, wrapping your brain around the concept of geometry, huh?
What happens is like there'll be like a dream where I remember bits and pieces of it for like super far along, but
Mm,
then most dreams I just sort of like forget the next day or like immediately when I wake up.
yeah, that is the most common. What seems to be, there's kind of a sliding scale of most, in my estimation, I'm pretty convinced at this point. I believe we dream all night long. The brain never stops thinking. We just lose focus on it or the ability to remember it. So 99.9% of all of our dreams, our thoughts that occur while unconscious, just disappear. So psychologically, in order to encode something into memory, long-term memory, you got to first pay attention to it. Then you got to hold it in short-term memory. And then that kind of gets translated over into long-term memory. Well, if you're just not paying attention, it's like having your eyes closed. You just don't see. It's there. You just don't see it. Don't remember it. So that's the vast majority of our dreaming is that kind of thought process we're just not really paying attention to, or it's happening in my case, I think, so deep in sleep that my ability to be aware of it is just absent. Like I believe I dreamed last night. Couldn't tell you anything. I have no memory of anything. As I say, I think we dream all the time. Well, sliding scale. Long story short, then there's the beginnings of an awareness that we had a dream without any details. I get that fairly often as well. Then I know I had a dream for sure. I can remember brief flashes of it, but nothing distinct, nothing I could tell a story based on. Then there's a kind of hazy portion where you remember more or less of a dream. And then there's fully, I remember everything vivid, clear, bright as day. And then even beyond that is the lucid dreaming, where people are like, I was so aware and attentive to my thought process that I was able to adjust it or control it in a way. These seem to be different levels. I'm working on kind of a systemic system description, I guess, is the idea of kind of the different layers and levels. Anyway, that's my rant.
I think that there's something between being in the dream and being aware that you're in the dream and lucid dreaming. I think that there's a stage in between there
Yeah.
where you can affect yourself, but you're not affecting the rest of the dream.
Gotcha. That's a good point. Yeah. No, I think that's why this is a work in process. And that's why I like sharing it with people, because sometimes you get a new idea that I was not able to think of myself. And I think that's very valid. Um, and what it seems to be is different layers or the sliding scale, a spectrum of consciousness itself. You know, there's conscious attention. We know, both of us probably believe, we're awake now. This is happening in reality. We're talking to other people. We're doing a thing. We got a coffee cup in our hands, things like that. Then there's inattention, where there's all kinds of things going on around us we're not focused on because we're doing something else. We've narrowed our focus. That doesn't mean that that's not happening. It just means we're not even really aware of it. So I think there's that sliding scale, and the deeper you go into sleep, I think it gets confused with the like delta wave, alpha wave sleep things. Like you're dreaming in all of these states, in my estimation. But there's something about the depth, the intensity of the sleep itself that renders us more or less capable of attending to what's happening in our thought process, or even being aware we're having any at all. Yeah, something like that. I'm going to make a scale one of these days. It'll be planning on, I hope someday, write a book, like Dream Interpretation the Wizard's Way, something like that, where I kind of bring together my own theories on it. No. But you also mentioned photography. You said you actually came to that before math.
Yeah, when I was little, I was always interested in photography, and so then as I got older, I was actually able to get a nice camera.
Yeah. What? How old were you when you had when you became aware that you had an interest in photography? You talking real little or older?
I had to have been it had to have been like before first or second grade because
Okay.
my aunt was into photography or is a professional photographer, and my dad had a one of those point and shoot cameras, and I thought that that was just the coolest thing.
Do you remember what you would take pictures of back then? What you were trying to do with the activity?
Mostly of stuff like flowers and stuff like that. I was never interested in people. Back then I was more interested in plants, and then it shifted over to landscapes as I got older.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that too in terms of landscape. So, nature photography. Uh, I played with that a little bit myself in terms of I tried it out. I've tried out a lot of things throughout my life. To me, it was always. I remember taking one picture of this weird curlicue in a tree. So, and what I mean by that is like the branch went out and then it actually went down and wrapped around and came back out and kept going up. The whole branch turned upside down and then kept growing. I'm like, that's like a perfect circle. So I took a picture of that, and that stands out in my memory as something that was cool to photograph. So, but I think I kind of gave it up because I'm like, God, you got to look so hard for weird things like that, and you know, just normal nature was never that
I
interesting to
also
me.
like grew up with a tree that had been struck by lightning, a mesquite tree that had been struck by lightning in my front lawn.
Wow.
So I had always had like an interesting piece of greenery right in my front lawn, and so I thought it was cool, and so it made me sort of like appreciate other just weird little oddities a bit more.
Definitely. Yeah. What are some of your favorite landscapes that you've photographed just in general? I mean,
Um, there's I like a time lapse I did this summer.
oh yeah.
I also like this one waterfall picture I took where it's not a very big waterfall, but it's incredibly bright, vividly green from the moss
Oh,
and how
yeah.
the light bounced off of it because it's one of the few ones where it didn't spike the colors from being super dark shadows and super bright greens from the sunlight.
Yeah. Very cool. That actually kind of, I mean, the idea that you mentioned that, and then also you're considering for your kind of capstone project this idea of working with light and water. Maybe something about that experience is like if I can definitely merge those two, this appreciation of this beautiful structure of nature and some kind of mathematical principles. I mean, now, have you thought of that before? Or am I kind of giving you a new connection?
I've been trying to work on that for a little while, and I'm trying to avoid having to write an entire computer program about it.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting effects that happen with waterfalls specifically, and I love it when they have enough splash that it puts the mist in the air and you get the rainbow in front of the waterfall. I wonder if that's an idea. Like, I'm not maybe going to solve your problem because I don't know what I'm doing about this, but like the physics of how that happens. Like, how much splash do you need to mist the water enough, and what angle of light to produce a rainbow? And then you can see if your project would be, if I calculate this correctly, can I artificially induce a rainbow? Uh, Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe that's a bit too complicated, or it takes a lot of engineering as well as just the physics of it. Um, I don't know if you've considered that or
Well, making a rainbow is real easy if you just walk out into the backyard with a hose and put your thumb on it.
that's true. That is true. Fair enough. Yeah. Maybe it sounded more impressive to me just because I really don't know what
Well,
I'm doing.
the physics behind it's really interesting, and showing it off is interesting. The the difficult part is actually photographing it because
Yeah.
rainbows are an artifact of our eyes. So you have to make so uh, so what is a rainbow to you isn't quite a rainbow to the camera.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. It's also a weird
And so
phenomenon like that with the moon. Like, you try to take a picture of the moon, you're like, that's so beautiful. It's got a halo around it. You take a picture of it and it's just black with a white dot.
yep.
Oh God. Well, that's just my phone camera. They're not really made to capture the halo of a around the moon.
Well, even professional cameras won't capture the halo around the moon most of the time because they're aiming for clarity, and light beams coming off of it generally are your eye not being 100% able to focus on the thing.
Mm,
And
fair enough.
so there are people who it's called bokeh, where they will intentionally have something in the background out of frame or blurred in a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
and the shape of those blurriness is called the bokeh, and some people like certain shapes. Like some people aim for stars, and some people aim for like circles, and some people like hexagons and stuff like that.
Now, is that just a preference of the photographer for a certain kind of shape, or does it change in their mind? Does it change the way the picture processes?
It is a shape preference, but most people generally seem to agree on certain shapes for like greenery. Like people like circles for like greenery for the most part because it tends to blur a bit easier on
Mm,
the eyes. But then for like harsh things like street lamps, people like stars.
gotcha. There are, speaking of, and this is kind of getting into my specialty, these associative things. We definitely, I would say, if you ask enough people, and I think this is, there might even be some research on it, but if you ask people, is a circle associated with nature or architecture or other things, they would go nature. How about a square? Oh, cities, buildings, man-made structures. Um, because nature, well, and then the natural association, we observe nature has a lot of flowing curves and things that are irregular. um but it's mankind that makes straight edges. You almost don't find a perfect square in nature anywhere. It's completely artificially created structure. I mean, and when we do, we're blown away by it. We're like, wow, that never happens. The idea of this, that rock is accidentally, completely naturally, perfectly square. What? How does that even happen? Well, we would assume it didn't naturally happen. Someone made it and left it there, but is that true? I don't know. And especially water, like smoothing rocks and whatnot. The whole idea of river rocks. I love that. I love rivers. I'm more of like a rivers, mountains kind of guy than say ocean. Never really had a thing for the ocean, but I was going to ask more about that. The idea of waterfalls are interesting too, conceptually. it's a thing that only happens. It's a thing that only happens. It's not actually a thing in that way. Like you could have a cup full of water, and that's a thing. And there's water as a thing, and a cup is a thing. But a waterfall is only a waterfall as the water is falling. And it's not actually one thing. It's like a process in process, a thing in process. That blows me away too. That there's other conceptual stuff like that. It only exists while it's happening. I don't know if I'm
Yeah, I
saying
sort
something
of get you.
profound or yeah. Anyway, that's uh yeah. I saw an interesting post the other day. What was it on? I don't know, one of the social media sites, and it was a waterfall that hit the rocks in a particular way that it looked like a woman in an old timey dress. Uh, and I think they called it bridal veil or something, or the bride falls or something like that. Because it looked like a woman, maybe holding a bouquet, getting ready to get married. I'm like that's amazing. Uh, and that's what were they call that? Pareidolia, the idea of when we see faces
Yeah,
in the clouds.
yeah, you see faces and shapes in clouds, and we think it's a human face.
Mm-hmm. Very much programmed to see the world that way. It's the most useful way to see it, to kind of personalize things. Well, and then that's why we also anthropomorphize animals to try and apply human motivations or abilities to them. It makes them easier to interact with. Because honestly, we have no idea what they're thinking. We can assume and test for some things, but um,
Well, I think that's also why we shifted over from like games like Pong to games more like Mario and stuff like that, where you're controlling another human character.
yeah, easier to put ourselves into it or to feel like we are part of the action for sure. You got any favorite? Are you a gamer?
Yeah, I played a lot of League of Legends in high school.
Ah,
Um, and and then I got busy with college, and so I don't have a game specifically at the moment, but I really enjoy fighting games like Tekken and stuff like that.
gotcha. Nice. Very cool. Yeah, I like first person kind of 3D games. You can look up and down, left and right, and kind of your environment. But I'm terrible at first person shooters. They're like awful. I don't know how people get like headshot. 360 no scope. Can't do it. Can't do it. I don't play any PvP stuff. Never got into League of Legends either. Never appealed to me, that kind of isomorphic perspective. I'm like, that's not my kind of game. So fair enough though. Got another
Well,
airplane.
or no, raindrop.
Oh, might start raining on us. Well, if you got to change locations, it's okay. You can always, take me with you. But just in case it's about to start raining on you, did you want to get into the dream thing?
Yeah, actually, the dream did involve me playing a game.
Interesting. Cool. So,
Yeah.
let me just make a note here. We got what 28. Um, and so, as per my usual process, I just shut up and listen. You tell me the dream like a story, beginning to end. First thing you remember, last thing you remember. Um, and then we'll go back through it again and see what we can put together.
Yeah. Uh, so it started off with me, sort of like coming in, like in one of those movies where it like blurs in to someone like doing something, but it was me playing a video game, and it was me watching myself as the narrator. Um, and the game was sort of finding an exit to an abandoned to an abandoned uh, sort of like city structure that was all wooden. Um, so it was uh, so think like one of those ghost towns out in like with the cowboys and stuff like that. Um, but they were all three-story wooden buildings. And then uh, to to beat the game, you would have to go inside of them and navigate through them, find a bonus of some kind, and then find the exit at the end. Um, And so I was switching between controlling myself in the game, or not controlling between controlling the game character that was sort of like was like a blue guy that was sort of like Mario. Think that Mario 64 kind of thing. Um, all wooden buildings. And then I would switch to the narrator looking at myself playing the game and having a conversation with myself about how to beat the game and what steps to go through, and what order you have to do things in. I don't remember specifically because it's hard to remember dream conversations.
Mm-hmm.
All of the wooden, all the wood stuff was brown. Um, outside was sort of like a dusty color. The wood was like a dark brown though. Um, every once in a while I'd see another player run around, but it was more like an NPC than a real player, but they were shaped the same as the current character that I was controlling. Um, and then oh, in each building get you could generally jump and you could jump off walls, but you then each building you had one use of an extra movement skill, like a double jump or a hover or something like that. And each time you entered a building or a room, you would get one use of that that wouldn't return per se. And then eventually I came across myself uh, getting the bonus, and then something about the bonus, like it made a sound or something that sort of like startled me awake.
Okay. And that was pretty much the end of the dream right there, that you startled you awake and boop, and you woke up.
Yeah, I never
Okay.
actually got to the end. I never
Okay.
seem to get to the end in the dreams.
Do dreams have an end? Is a very interesting question. So if we run with the hypothesis that oh, let me do this to 3256, that we are always thinking, there is quite possibly no end. There is no actual end. There's just a transition to conscious attention on something else. Um, in a sense, it's like the space between heartbeats. What's the difference between one and the next? Well, it's how fast it's beating. It's whether it's related to our activity. It's got to be harder, faster, etc. You know, I would say uh, the concept that dreams don't actually have an end, that there's always something more, is because your brain just continues the stream of consciousness in a way, the flow onto the next thought and the next thought and the next thought. So we just kind of pick arbitrary ending points in some ways, and that's kind of what awakening is. Is that, well, you're done being unconscious for now, so let's do the conscious attention thing for a while.
Maybe it startled me awake because I got to the end of the dream.
It's possible. Yeah, it's sometimes there's a weird reflexive relationship between our waking experience affecting our dreams, and our dreams affecting our waking experience, including waking up. So there's some examples from the books. This guy had a dream inspired by being bitten by a mosquito. The dream was about this. The experience of it was happening while he was asleep. It bit a little mosquito, tiny critter bit his hand, but that sensation was magnified in his brain. And right as he's waking up from the irritation, he had a dream of this giant insectoid lobster-like creature, huge. You know, and that's what that tiny sensation influenced. That woke him up and inspired that dream in his estimation. And the other side of it is we have such a disturbing thought process. People that wake up from nightmares screaming, you know, the thought itself is so disturbing that we shock ourselves awake on purpose to escape. You know, wake up screaming, that kind of a thing. the desire to run away, our sympathetic nervous system actually kicks in. We get adrenaline, we wake up. And that's all completely fabricated by pure imagination. We can talk ourselves into and out of all kinds of biological responses. It's fascinating in my estimation, the power of the mind. They used to experiment with hypnotism in a way, and some people could be hypnotized so thoroughly, just hypnosis, that they could have, in the 1800s, they did this, one case of a woman who had an operation of some kind, probably not deep internal spread in the rib cage operation, but some kind of a surgical procedure. And she was lucid and spoke the whole time. And there was pain involved. Had she not been hypnotized, she woke up from the hypnotization and had a memory of the whole thing and reported, I never felt anything. I didn't feel any pain. We haven't really found out how to capitalize on that effectively across the entire population. There's no substitute for just knocking you out with drugs and then going to town with a scalpel. But okay, enough tangents from me. So we got a very interesting dream. You said it blurs in.
Yeah,
It comes into focus from unfocused to focused.
yeah, sort of like one of those holiday Christmas films where it like comes in to focus, sort of like you're coming in through it, sort of like defogging glass or something like that.
That stands out to me as something interesting because of your interest in photography. I mean, I just played a game, what was it, a couple nights ago, where part of it was you're looking through a camera and you can change the direction of what you're looking at and you can change the focus of the camera to bring things into, and it actually had that dual layer of focus. Like if you focus on the tree in front of you, the background gets fuzzy. So that was pretty cool. So the way I do this, and to kind of give you an idea of the process, and I like to narrate the process sometimes not so much, but that jumps, just that idea, just the very first experience of this memory of the dream itself is related to your interest in photography, the idea of bringing something into focus that was out of focus. So what the associative idea would be, I had it just a second ago. Think of what you're about to experience through the lens of bringing something into sharper focus. Here you're able to, it's almost like focus on this, pay attention to this in the way that will sharpen your ability to see what you're supposed to understand from this. There's something going on there.
That makes quite a bit of sense, and that also explains why um, the me playing the game was explaining how the game worked, while the me watching the game get played was asking questions, sort of like trying to focus in on it.
Yeah, there was definitely a talking to yourself communication process. Because there's, so if you think of it in terms of our attention and our action in the real world, there is a experience of being completely in the moment. You have no awareness of yourself. You are simply yourself experiencing the thing. Then we can, by choice or by biological compulsion, however it works, get thrown out of ourselves. Now we are witnessing ourself experience the moment, which is a completely different layer. It's almost something uniquely human. We can say, I am me, but I can also look at me from a distance. So you've got yourself in a dual role of coaching yourself through some kind of experience. And you've conceptualized it in this gaming sense. So what was so it blurs in, and you said there's a structure. So what I want to do is, as much as you can, and the details will fill themselves in, but it blurs in. And the first thing you remember is you're standing outside one of these buildings preparing to go in, or you're already
No,
inside.
I'm already inside. It's um, it's black everywhere, except for um, except for a face, a body, um, the game controller in my hand, and then the screen. Um, but there's no TV behind it. There's nothing else around it because it wasn't particularly important to the dream, or it wasn't particularly important at the moment
Sure.
because the only thing that was to be focused on was what was immediately there. Everything else just kind of didn't even exist.
Yeah, that goes with that theme of focus as well, of excluding the extraneous. And we do that all the time. It's like if you're driving a car, you need to know where the white lines are. You need to know where the other drivers are. It's nice that maybe, hey, there's a beautiful sunset, but you start looking at that, you drift in the lane and you die. So we have this very necessary ability to focus ourselves on what is immediately important for the best effect. And we just tune out all the rest of it. That's why, what is it? You probably remember being a kid and your mom comes upstairs or whatever and says, "Hey, I've been calling you." And you're like, "I'm watching my show." Like, didn't even hear it. And now parents assume, "Oh, you just didn't want to hear it. You weren't selective attention." I'm like, yes, literally selective attention, but also, yes,
Oh,
did not hear it.
I have terrible, terrible selective hearing. I would sit in the kitchen doing math homework, and someone would have to literally put their hand in front of me
Hmm.
before I would notice them. They could like bump into me, speak to me, just nothing.
Oh, yeah. And that is, I have found something that seems to be biological in some ways, partly psychological. It's always nature nurture, but if you were that way as a kid, you're probably still that way as an adult. I am. Are you finding that still the same experience in your daily life? You get really focused down on something, the rest of the world fades away.
With certain tasks specifically, yes.
Okay.
Other tasks, I have to multitask it to actually get it done. I
Uh,
have to be like doing one thing and then another, um, because it's not taking up 100% of my focus.
Fair enough. Yeah. So that might be something as well, that it put that imagery, just this portion of like you yourself, narrator, narrator mode with the controller in your hand, screen, and it's like, imagine this is an instance like serious focus that excludes everything else. So there's something in there as well. So we've got this idea of a double idea of bringing things into focus. Get the lens sharpened so the image is strong, and imagine you've excluded extraneous things, and you're going to just that also helps with not helps but happens with the scientific method itself. We try to eliminate confounding variables to really understand, am I getting a good result based on this variable that I'm trying to test. There's a very sharp focus. I don't know if that brings anything to mind.
It did actually remind me about two things. The reason I could tell when I was in different modes is I could feel the controller in my hand and I could feel my mindset change. Like like when you're in the zone. When I was in the zone, I was playing the game, and I could feel the controller, the thumbsticks. And then when I would ask a question, it would come from a different part of me that wasn't playing the game and wasn't having the same feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. We can kind of do that with ideas. And I encourage, what is it? I have in the past encouraged people to, take an idea out of their own head and look at it. It's the idea of having a thought versus believing the thought. Um, and so you can say it's a mindfulness practice that goes along with like Buddhist meditation practices. Meditation, your brain doesn't actually stop. Thoughts come, thoughts go. It's how we interact with them, and whether we can just kind of float away from that a little bit and say, "There's a thought. Hey, there's another one." If we latch onto them and we start having investment in proving a thought necessarily true, or having a panic attack over the possibility of a particular kind of thought. So you've definitely got, so there is a dual consciousness, like I was saying before, the idea of you're in the zone, in the moment, you're in the experience completely and not distracted by any awareness of self. And then there is our ability to choose to step back, or involuntarily forced to step back. And I find that with myself in social situations, like with us just talking here, I'm in this thing and I'm just saying relevant to what we're talking about. I'm not imagining myself, like maybe as the audience sees me, as a guy sitting at a desk doing a thing and talking to someone else. I sometimes get thrust into that awareness against my will in a way that, like, can I just not observe myself experiencing things and just have the experience, please? And it's not always that easy. I don't know if that resonates with you at all. Did you get kind of thrown out of yourself and you're watching yourself?
Like I'm having the conversation, but then I'm also like, I hope I'm not being too loud for the other people in the area.
Yeah.
Because when I showed up, there wasn't anyone here, but then more people showed up later.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, hopefully it isn't too awkward to share your thoughts and feelings around other people.
Oh no, they're not paying any attention to me.
Right. That's so I get a lot of social anxiety, and part of it's like, oh, everybody's looking at me. And then I have to realize nobody's looking at you. Nobody cares. Who the fuck are you to them? Unless you're doing something truly outrageous that gets their attention. You're yelling, you're jumping up and down, you're doing dangerous things or whatnot. But that doesn't always let me go back into the moment. I get a lot of that social anxiety. I'm going to sneeze. Am I? Oh, that's awful. There was a sneeze there. Didn't want to come out. Oh, I hate that. I hate that feeling, right? You saw it.
Leave it in. Leave it in.
Wow. I love letting it out. There's something so satisfying about a good
honking leave
sneeze.
It in the video. Leave it in the video.
Oh, for sure. No, I don't edit any of this. I hope people laugh at me. That's if you would like to engage in the comments and tell me what an idiot I am. Hey, it all helps the algorithm. So hopefully that was an amusing moment. It made my eyes water. That's okay. I was going somewhere with all of that, but okay, back to the actual imagery. So your first impression was seeing yourself as the player of the game, focusing on the game, reducing extraneous distractions. And inside that window, you're looking at the game. And when you focused in on the screen, that's when you became the character?
Yeah. When I focused in on the screen itself, I then became the person playing. At that point, it was just sort of like me looking at the game from behind Mario 64 type of camera view. And switching between narrator and player wasn't really impacting the camera view, but it was impacting my mindset and what I was physically feeling.
Okay, so did the entire dream kind of take place as controller in a dark room looking at a screen, and sometimes your feeling of which person you were changed, or sometimes did your field of conscious awareness completely shift to now I'm in it, I can look around 3D style versus I'm looking at a screen?
It felt like looking at screen, but it was like a screen that was like it was like full screened versus windowed mode.
Okay.
But for the entirety of, like, I never felt like I was the character. I always felt like I was playing the character, but it was more like I'm physically there looking down at them, controlling them, versus I'm looking at a screen that's looking at them where I can look around. If that makes, it's kind of weird, but
it is a bit. But I think the way you're explaining it's fantastic, and I think I'm wrapping my head around it a bit. So, yeah, that's interesting. But I think the important part is that dual consciousness. You are the character, and you're not. You are controlling the character, and that's something we have too with just, I would say that's kind of in some ways the essence of free will is that we are our bodies, but it's not a mechanistic, deterministic world. There is something, like we were talking about the pyramid of knowledge and that tiny gap between that and the flame. Something happens in that tiny gap where we get to make choices. Maybe our choices are influenced by nature. It's always both. Sure, we have biological drives. We have insecurities that are based on anxieties that have a root in physical, our nervous system. Fair enough. But it does seem our experience of being alive is that we can make choices, is that we can direct our own behavior. So playing video games in general, is especially when you're controlling a humanistic character, is a great metaphor for life and for our ability to observe ourselves and say, I could do this. Do I want to? Why should I? Is this important to me? So there could be something there about making choices and so that we've got advice giving, choice making, and focusing on that kind of interaction. So just throwing these things out there. You don't have to have an immediate response, but I'm trying to conceptualize, where are we starting? What does this look like? What's the formula of the dream saying about what's about to take place? So the first thing that happened in the game, so to speak, was you're going into a building. And did you start on the outside of the building in the little screen?
Yeah,
or?
you would always start on the outside and then you'd have to run into them. And then from inside one, you could run into the next one.
So these were kind of connected buildings, like you had to go into the first one and the first one leads you to the second, almost like progressing through levels.
Almost like progressing through. It's almost like the front was like a level selector, and then as you ran through it, you ran through all of the levels sequentially.
Okay, fair enough. And what do you remember about engaging with the space in the first building in terms of what was the particular challenge and what was the unique bonus skill you had to use to conquer it?
The first one, there wasn't any sort of unique bonus skill. The first one was you had a first floor that was barren. Then you walked upstairs, uh, and there was sort of like dual bunk beds inside of a room, and then there was a hallway um, that led on to the next floor, and it was sort of showing how the space functioned. Like, oh, there you can go up and down, you can jump off stuff, you can go into things.
Kind of almost like a tutorial level.
Yeah, almost like a tutorial level.
So no real challenge, just get familiar with how to move, basic movement. It's very interesting corollaries that someone wrote a book, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, and I had an idea of everything I need to know in life I learned from massively multiplayer online role-playing games. But someone already wrote a book, Everything I Need to Know in Life I Learned from Dungeons and Dragons, which fair enough, is close enough. But the idea of a tutorial level and how to move in this new physical space, tremendous corollary to being an infant and learning how to operate your legs such that I can crawl and then eventually balance and stand and then run and then ask for a cookie. There's this progression. We all kind of start as this infant that really doesn't know how to, but we've standardized some of our controls, WASD and whatnot, jump and crouch. A lot of things repeat. But there's always that learning process of, okay, what's unique about this game? How does it, what specials, and we get around to special skills eventually. So conquering the first level, the first building was cakewalk.
Yeah, it was well, all of the buildings were easy because the me playing the game was sort of good at the game and was sort of explaining it. The second room showed double jumping and how you could only double jump once because it was the hallway sort of like stopped. There was a space where you would have to double jump to get across it. And then if you failed, you'd fall to the first floor and you'd have to run out and start again. But Um, but my but to me playing the game just sort of like did it, and just sort of like um, uh, stayed in the room just long enough to explain the room, and then walked off to the next part.
Interesting. So you got this idea of the double jump. So definitely gone from walking to jumping. I mean, there's an increase in complexity level or building upon skills.
Yeah.
Learn to walk, learn to run, kind of thing. Um, so making it through the second building was also pretty easy enough, and it was the lingering in that environment only occurred to offer an explanation. What do you remember about the explanation? Was the you playing the game explaining how to perform a double jump? What were they telling you about the environment? Oh, lost you. So I had just asked you a question. You might have even started to try to respond, or I didn't get to finish it entirely. But the idea of what was your player self telling your character self about the second building and the double jump? Not exact words, impression conveyed is fine.
Well, I wasn't the character ever. It was me and then the narrator. But I was telling the narrator like how to go about playing the game. Like, oh, you can double jump in this room, but you can only double jump the once. Um, and then there was like a thing at the bottom that was sort of like a counter that had like the number of double jumps you were allowed to do.
Very interesting that you've got the introduced idea of now a new special skill, but it's limited. There's something about the finiteness of that, something about the novelty of it. It's like you can only use this once, so you have to be careful how you use it. Don't waste it. Don't use it in the wrong place. It will not work twice. Yeah. You don't have to have an answer or commentary on that, but just very interesting concept involved. And also very much in line with the way a lot of games work. You don't have unlimited abilities because then there's no challenge to it. So there's something consistent with that as
Yeah,
well.
and that room specifically wasn't particularly challenging, but if you wasted the double jump, you'd fall to the ground and you'd have to start the game over.
And you knew that at that time, the idea of if you did fail to properly apply it, you'd have to go back through the entrance to the first building. I mean, this was like a really a Mario style game where no more lives left, start over.
Yeah, and I sort of like explained it to myself, and then later, and then it sort of skipped level 3 and 4, or it skipped level 3 entirely because I don't know why. My brain decided level 3 wasn't important.
Sure. You had an awareness that you passed level 3 in terms of like, but we don't need to pay attention to that, whatever that was.
Yeah, level 3 just sort of, level 3 wasn't part of the dream, but I know that my character that I played through level 3 and got to level 4.
Okay. I'm going to boost your gain a little bit here.
That's okay. Sorry about that.
No, not a problem. You switched devices, but I think I was able to get it back into a better audio range. So no, I fixed it. We're good. So you did have the idea that you successfully conquered in a way level 3, but really no memory of it beyond the idea that, okay, we beat that. So focus on this. That's interesting too.
And then level 4, was sort of like happening in the background as I was the narrator asking, and that's when I started asking a bunch of questions about the game. And so I remember level 4 happening in the background, but it wasn't the focus of what I was asking questions about. Sort of like asking, how do you beat the game? How do you determine if you were doing well in the game? Is there any kind of bonuses or anything like that? Is there a time segment or something like that? And and sort of the fourth level was sort of blurry because it wasn't so much the focus as explaining the game, asking questions about how the game functioned.
So level 4 was playing out in the background as your focus shifted now to you, the player, you interacting with you, the narrator, you, which is, so there's actually kind of 3 layers to this. There's like the narrator, the player, and the game.
Yeah, and the fourth floor, I know introduced floor 3. Floor 3 didn't have stairs going to it, but in level 4, you'd have to jump on walls to get up there.
Okay.
But it was sort of introducing a third floor into the game.
So in the first 2 buildings, there were only 2 stories in a sense, or at least if there was a third, you couldn't reach it and you weren't meant to. But by the time you get to the 4th building, it's like, okay, now you've acquired enough skill or familiarized yourself with the environment. Now you get a new bonus skill in a way where you can kind of parkour off the wall to get finally to the 3rd floor.
You're in at the 3rd floor. You're going between the 2nd and 3rd floors for the remainder of the game until you finish the game. And the 1st floor is sort of a reset point where you have to go back to a certain amount before you can keep going.
Interesting. Yeah. So there's kind of a, in a sense, a no turning back progression. Like once you've escalated, climbed,
you can
elevated.
Turn back between. You can go back between floor 2 and 3, but not floor 1.
Yeah. There's the concept I'm trying to explain is something about the it's like the finality of change. Once you've gone beyond a certain point, there's no really going back without restarting the game, and it has that way with life too. There's what has been seen cannot be unseen. What has been done cannot be undone. Even if you change your mind later and decide to, say, make amends or undo a situation, the period of time that elapsed while the situation was what it was can never be undone, even if you start over. There's kind of a finality of progression. I don't know if this is resonating with anything. There's something in there. I might be phrasing it poorly.
Yeah, it's sort of like with my classes at the moment, because some of them are going back over things that I've previously gone over. And some of them are going over brand new material, but they're all based on the same foundations. So the foundations aren't being gone over, but sort of the stuff that I've learned already, they're sort of going over it in a new way, which is a lot of what mathematics is you end up doing 3 different things that all explain the same problem.
Yeah. Very much so. No, I found the same thing in my psychology classes in college. Is like, and for me that's very helpful. So I got the TISM, and repetition was a damn beautiful thing for me. Seeing the same concept applied to multiple different concepts, going over it again. You get into a new class in 3rd year, and it's like, hey, remember that thing we taught you 1st year? We're going to go over that one more time. Make sure you remember what it is. Now, look at this. Watch what we can do with it here and how that applies. Now you throw in this other variable. Bam, now you got a top-down view. Look at that. And you can kind of see these different things interacting. I think, I was getting a sense that, and I'll just throw it out there because we finally kind of came around to it. It was the idea of colleges, in a way, very much like playing a video game. You have this progression through different floors. How many other buildings were there? I mean, you had a 4th building. Were there 5, 6, 10, or was it just 1, 2, 3, 4?
I know that there was. I only remember going through about 8 of them, but I remember that there was about 8 of them, but I don't remember going through some of them because they were sort of like later in the dream part, and it's harder to remember stuff that happened later until the very end. I tend to remember the beginning and the ending of stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah. Are you at all considering going for like a PhD? Like staying in school a full 8 years, so to speak? Have you
Um,
thought about it or not at all?
I've thought about it, but it's not particularly something that I care about. If I end up doing it, it'll be incidental. Like I'll get the bachelor's. I'll be doing whatever job I'm doing. And if they want me to get the PhD, I'll end up going to go get it. But it's not something that I'm it's not something that I'm particularly focused on.
Fair enough. That is just an interesting coincidence that you could go to post secondary education for 4 or 8 years. And a lot of people do. So, in a sense, the game has 8 levels if you want to play them all, or you can bounce at 4. Maybe, I don't know if that resonates at all. Like this game being metaphorical of your school experience. Is that resonating at all?
Um,
Or,
yeah, to a certain extent, yeah.
yeah, I don't want you to accept it if it's not, if we haven't really hit on it, but
Um,
it might be
I
something else. It might be social or, relational in different ways. So sometimes things use a metaphor of like, imagine it
I
like a video game. The video game's kind of like college, but really what you're looking at is this other layer and how it's similar to these type of things.
I
Come here.
I think it might have been sort of explaining well, right before I had gone to sleep, I was sort of stressed out about internships,
Oh yeah.
and so the number of levels I don't think is particularly what it was, but finding work that I'm able to do and be proficient at and have that same sort of feeling.
Yeah. Let me do this real quick. This dog's driving me crazy. I'm just gonna let him out. Then we can keep talking. Hang on. I was gonna ask when when did this particular dream happen?
It happened last Friday.
Last Friday. Okay. Um do you have any strong recall of something that was happening during that week that you were not sure what you felt about it or how you were going to handle it, or something the opposite, like
Um,
something coming the next week that was going to challenge you to have an answer you didn't have yet?
I uh, didn't do particularly well on a test, and we had gotten that back in
Ah,
Thursday, and so I had sort of had a day to be like, okay, this is how I'm going to deal with that, and then the next day, I sort of had this dream where I wasn't where where like I knew exactly what I was doing, but I was also like questioning what was going on.
yeah. Well, when you look at that, it could be related to the test because sometimes, well, okay, so what broad strokes, what do we got going on? The idea of you are deploying skills that you've been relatively successful at, and now suddenly you've gotten a little bit of feedback that something went wrong. You didn't score perfectly or as high as you wanted to. So you had a challenge to your self perception of competence. And in a situation like that, we do a bit of a reassessment. We're like, number one, do I care? Did I just fuck off and not do the work and or put 100% into the test? Was I overconfident and I didn't study as much as I should have? We start asking ourselves all these questions and providing ourselves answers. We have to find answers to tell ourselves to these questions. Number one, what do I feel about it? Number two, what do I want to do about it if I care? So if you think about it from that framework, do you think that might have inspired this dream? Does that seem connected or meh?
Um, that seems that seems connected. Um,
You got a feeling
sort
of
of like
significance there?
yeah,
Again, it could
I
be
think
something
it.
else, but go ahead.
Um, no, I think you're right. I also think that it meant more than one thing at a time because um because the how well I do is also tied to what's going to happen. So it's I don't know a good way to explain it. Where it's where it felt like the test um was something that happened, and I know why I messed up on the test. It's because showed up uh I showed up late for the test, and so I didn't do particularly well on it. Uh, and so it sort of feels like at the same time that uh, uh where yeah, it's that I messed up on the test, but it's that I still didn't I still am confident in my abilities to do well on the next one, but also um looking for how do I get into this in the zone state. Maybe I'm trying. It's hard to like conceptually talk about things that are sort of in the mind, but also outside the mind.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, for sure. And that's why I'm kind of letting you just, sometimes I got to ramble. I just got to say all the wrong things first. No, that's not what I meant. It's sort of like this, but it's not. It's something else. Sometimes you just got to say it out loud until you figure out what you're thinking.
Yeah, it's sort of like I couldn't get into the zone state for that specific test, and it was my brain remembering what that feeling feels like.
Yeah, definitely. And there's something very test like about games. I mean, if you think of it from a step back and look at what it is point of view, if the game designer made it such that the physics of the game work a particular way, your goal is to get from one platform to another, you have to hold down B, run, and jump at the end, get sufficient velocity and the right arc to land there, and you get instant feedback about whether you passed or failed the test. You fail, you die, you start over. You succeed, you land on the platform. Bam. And it's kind of crafted that way. And there's multiple layers to that too. Like the tests you're taking in school are artificially created. They're engineered. They're in a way that's school is a bit of a game, and the teachers are the game designers. They're like, but they're trying to translate that onto here's real world skills. You fail a test in the real world, and you're you stick your hand in the fireplace and you get burned. I mean, the real world is also a test. It lets you know immediately if you did something wrong. Hey, here's pain to remind you. You were going to say, sorry.
Yeah, like if you don't do well, your boss gets upset with you pretty instantly.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's multiple layers to that too. It's like, why should I care if my boss gets mad at me? Well, personally, I don't like people mad at me. I want to feel competent. I want to feel like I'm appreciated for what I do. The person who's writing the paycheck is happy with my work, and because I care because I respect their opinion. I want them to think I'm doing well. That's one side of it. The other side is, why should I give a shit? Well, money is food and a place to live. So there's consequences on both sides, social and physical, real world consequences to our decisions. And again, video games, fantastic metaphor for learning skills, implementing them properly with rather rigid rules for feedback. You do the thing or you don't do the thing. There's no, oh, you kind of succeeded. There's a pit. You jump it or you don't. And you've got these representations of learning skills that kind of build on each other, double jump, and then maybe double jump to parkour. And that's very, very indicative of the college experience too. As you were saying, all the stuff I learned first year keeps coming back. This foundation I've built on, and you kind of don't return to that foundation. It never gets challenged again. Like there's a challenge element to learning what's on the first level. Then it's not a challenge anymore, but it never goes away. It's always the same. It continues to challenge you to live up to that standard, but you no longer return to the material and challenge the material itself. Now I feel like I'm rambling. You can tell me if any of that kind of feels relevant.
Yeah, that felt relevant because the stuff I'm doing in school is also directly related to what I'm going to be doing out directly once I get out.
Yeah, definitely. And you said this is also a time in your life where you're thinking about that next step and you're trying to assess, am I going to be able to successfully apply these things in the future? Is that kind of what also has been going through your mind? Maybe even around the idea of the test, maybe brought that into a clearer focus of like, well, here's an example of not applying what I know very well or failing to do so for reasons outside of my knowledge. Like I know the stuff, but I showed up late. So there's introduced a complication to my own gameplay, just tying one hand behind your back in a sense.
Yeah, sort of like, am I actually able to apply this in the real world versus do I just do I can because I know I conceptually know it, but am I able to actually apply it?
Yeah. And that's a big question that is not just, what am I trying to say? It's not just a matter of can you do it? It's a matter of can it be done in a sense. Like you may have all these skills and then there's nowhere to apply them in a way, a lack of opportunity for expression in a sense. Can I get a job where I make use of this versus not being able to make it? Like you've got all the knowledge and you can't do anything with it. You got all hammer and no nails.
Yeah, I have this photography skill, I have this mathematical skill, and I know that they interact, and I know a way in which they interact, but it's hard to find um, something that will allow me to do the both of them at the same time.
Yeah. So it seems like in this dream, you laid the foundation of the scene, the focus. You're trying to narrow yourself in. Let's find the clearest picture of what's going on. Let's see myself engaged in the process. Now let's look at the process as a metaphor for the problem I'm considering, and now look at the stages of this problem as you're going through trying to look for an answer, trying to solve it. So beat the level in a sense. And that brings us, so you got that all dialed in. You got the idea of what you were doing in the first 4 levels. And then you kind of, well, you even skip the third. You're like, okay, I get it. Okay. What's new about this environment? And then you've got this kind of blur of, okay, there were 8 more levels. I kept playing the game. And then what? Then what? And right at the very end, what did you say? You saw yourself get a bonus. And then there was a sound. Yeah. What was that last level like? What did that experience feel like, or that moment, or the circumstances around that?
In that last little bit, there was sort of a tight jump to get to the bonus, where you had to do a lot of frame perfect jumps beforehand. Prior to getting to the bonus. Otherwise you miss out on the bonus and you have to just sort of you still can complete the game, but you just missed out on the extra points from it.
And where were you at in terms of, narrator, player, character accomplishing those things? Was the narrator talking to you? Were you the narrator advising the player?
At that point, I was the player, sort of rambling on about the game at that point. I'd sort of forgotten that the narrator was there. As the player, like as the narrator, I still remembered that I was there, but as the player, I sort of like was talking to myself as the player at that point. I wasn't talking to the narrator.
What were you saying to yourself? Not exact words, but the gist of, was it building up hype, self-talk? You got this? Was it more like, now remember, you got to hit this wall in this way and this wall in this way. You can do it.
It was it was more like so you it was more like uh I was saying the route that you had to go through, the, and but prior to reaching each step, like, oh, I'm coming up to this point where you go jump or jump, um, 360 because something in the game, uh, twirl up, uh, and then you go to the left and then circle around that way. And then I would reach that point and then I would do those actions. So it's sort of like explaining the route prior to doing the route
Okay.
and sort of like making it up as I was going along because the level was sort of like constructing itself as I was inventing, as I was sort of doing the action.
Did you have the feeling that your verbalization of the next step created the next step, or you just had knowledge of it and the game was what it was, but it revealed
Uh,
itself as you moved forward?
it was more like um, the it was more like a deterministically random game in which me saying the movements didn't matter, but me doing the movements actually like made the level respond to it.
Interesting.
Like like the spin prior to the jump made the platform spawn.
Okay. And did you got the sense that the platform was designed to spawn there, or that actually you saying it caused it to appear?
Um, it wasn't designed specifically to spawn there. It was designed to spawn randomly, but
In response to a specific
in response
action.
to specific gameplay action, it
Gotcha.
spawned in a specific spot.
Okay. That's an interesting an analogy or metaphor as well, too, is that it's this weird combination that I love, too, of the world in general does respond to our actions, and sometimes those actions create the opportunity. So we do have the ability to make a platform for ourselves. Literally, you put up a treehouse up. This is that kind of physical manifestation of it does not exist, therefore I create it, and so it does. And that translates onto a different level. You can create your own opportunities in life in some ways, but also there's a deterministic world around us where you better have wood strong enough to hold you and a nail to hold it to the tree in order to make a platform for the tree house. So there's like rules for how to create your own reality that really has
Yeah,
to
sort of.
go ahead.
Yeah, sort of like how Pokemon speedruns have deterministic randomness in some of them,
Hmm.
where you control what spawns. It sort of felt like that, where we're like, oh, I know exactly how to make this thing, how to make the world respond to me in a certain way.
Yeah, that is very that's a very, what am I trying to say? Self-confident representation in your dream. It's like, there's some people who would be they in the exact same kind of dream, they would be frustrated because nothing they did worked and they would wake up from it feeling depressed. That's more of an indication of they feel powerless to affect the world around them. You got kind of the opposite thing going, like, look, if I pay attention and I focus and I do this, I believe there is a decent chance of success. I think I can succeed if I have the proper focus and I follow the process and I learn what I'm supposed to as I'm going along. It was that moment of capturing the bonus and hearing the sound and then waking up from it. What was that like? If you could describe it a little bit.
Um, as I went to capture it, it sort of like lit everything up, and it wasn't a loud sound. It was just a sound that wasn't me. It was just like do 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 or something
Yeah.
along those lines. It wasn't particularly loud, but it was just something that wasn't me making a noise. because up until that point, every sound had come from me, and sort of just any outside sound sort of like startled me and like made me wake up.
Yeah, that is very interesting as well. And I was going to say that is like, you never described, described a lot of visuals. Fair enough. No sounds, no sound of jumping, no sound coming from the game itself. This is, there's a reason we have bright sparkles and noises in response to our actions. It's confirmation that something has happened. It's, it's like, the dog scratching at the door. Let me. I'm gonna let him back in. It's chilly outside. We got some frost. So hang on. Well, that moment helped me think of the word I was looking for. Feedback. We get feedback from the environment that something has happened, and that happens in life. I mean, if you touch a table, there's a physical, tactile, audible, visual. Things happen in response to actions. We get feedback from our senses. So games mimic and imitate that. So the success music, the sparkly, the things light up and let you know that you've accomplished a goal. In a way, that's like cashing a paycheck. In a sense, you get your you collect the coins as you're bouncing along, and you get the bonus and the little score at the bottom kicks up. So again, very, very positive and self-confident in a way of like, you ended the dream on this accomplishment. I mean, you worked your way through to achieve this goal and you got it. You didn't show yourself failing or quitting in frustration or the narrator discouraging you. Yeah, I think if we conceptualize it in all of those ways and we relate it to contemplating how you feel and what you want to do about a brief instance of a poor result, some real life feedback of how you applied the process. If you look at it kind of beginning to end in that sense, what do you think?
Yeah, that sort of makes sense. Like if I can focus on the studying and I can focus on the studying would be like, oh, the places with floors 1 and 2, and then the actual test would be like the third floor. Then I actually get positive feedback at the end.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Is your internal monologue or dialogue with yourself between player and narrator. You're observing yourself, engaged in the process. The end result was, you can do this. You know how to do it. And you said you showed up late to the test. So there was that kind of, I overslept, or it wasn't important enough to me to get there on time. I said, fuck it, or some extraneous circumstance?
Extraneous circumstances. It's not the easiest to get to sleep at where I'm currently living.
Oh, some noise was happening around. And you're like, God, I just can't get to sleep. Huh?
Yeah, noise and light and stuff like that. And so I just couldn't get to sleep until rather late or rather early in the morning. Even it was
Gotcha.
And so I overslept, and we had a test that day where you actually had to show up to school.
Yeah, one of those situations where you needed the full amount of time to do it well or do it right, and maybe showing up on time. You got some bonus points for that. Had you done so, something like that.
Yeah, and actually brought the. You were allowed to bring some extra notes, but those had been left on my bed from when I had eventually managed to fall asleep.
Oh shit! There's some disorganization in there too. It's a weird thing we got going on with life. Like, life's not fair, and then there's the idea of people being unfair to us. Those are two separate things, and they can both be absent. If we do a little Johari window, they can both be absent, or they can both be happening at the same time. Life can be fair, and then we're treated unfairly as on top of that. But it's the same with video games. Like, sometimes they're constructed to, if you start running at the right moment and jump at the right place, so it's a time-based, velocity-based, and then you'll hit an opening that is moving, and you're not gonna hit that opening. And it's fair and not fair in a way, because you're not always given well, where am I supposed to start running? Where am I supposed to jump? So you got that trial and error thing of like, okay, if I jump here, if I run here, how about here? Okay, what's the timestamp for this level to get that moment of, at what point, what is it? There was something like that. It's making me think of like one of the Mario games where there was a moving platform you got to run and you jump on. The platform's this way, that way, and you try different things of like, okay, if the platform's all the way over on the right and I start running, will I land on it right at the moment it gets over to the left? I was going somewhere with all of that. In some ways, it's fair and it's unfair at the same time, and you're going to be held to the standard. You're going to get the bonus or not. You're going to get a good score on the test or not, based on all these different factors, some of which you can control, some of which you can't. Sometimes the game is, there's always a game designer in a way.
And the interesting thing is even as I was explaining getting the bonus, I was explaining how even if you don't get it, it doesn't impact your final score at the end.
Yeah.
You still
I missed that. You're right. Yeah.
You still have to get to the end. It's just the bonus is nice to collect for the people who put in the amount of work to try to get it anyways.
Sure. That might have been one way of consoling yourself about a one-off poor score on one test. No one ever requested my GPA. They wanted to see my degree in terms of, did you graduate? But an employer never asked me, what was your GPA? Like, and it could have been, I'll tell you, it was not a 4.0. So my philosophy was, the knowledge is for me, the grade is for the books. I honestly didn't care how well I did in some classes, because I never considered it a reflection of my actual ability or knowledge. Now it was in some degree. I mean, if a teacher says, look, you just didn't learn this, you didn't understand the concept. I think that's different from how well you wrote a paper and whether you put enough effort into it and whether there were extraneous circumstances. So it might've been like, maybe this bonus at the very end was scoring 100% on that test. And you realized it really isn't going to change anything. This one time I showed up late, I couldn't get to sleep. Fuck it, the game wasn't exactly designed fair. I still got judged for it. I tried to jump through all the hoops.
I still have to get to the end and pass the class anyways, even though the not getting the bonus doesn't make it any easier.
Yeah.
Like, not getting the bonus doesn't make the class easier or make the class harder, but still have to get to the end of the level anyway, or still have to get to the end of the game anyways and pass everything.
For sure. And then there's microcosms of that. I mean, getting to class on time is its own mini game. Scoring well on a test in that class is its own mini game. Nestled inside the larger game of passing the class, which is composed of all those discrete elements. Then on top of that, passing multiple classes to get out of college to eventually get a career. It's all these layered, nested experiences.
And then getting the career to eventually do something where I can work for myself and sort of do my math and photography at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's, if that makes sense to you, it seems like this dream might have come in response to that specific test in terms of just looking at yourself, looking at the situation and saying, how do I feel about this? What does this really mean to me? How should I respond to it? Do I need to go back to basics in some way? Do I need to rededicate my effort? Or is it, it's just a bonus? It'd be nice if I'd have gotten it, but is it worth stressing myself out over something that really this one time, not going to change anything in the long run?
Yes, but not so much that it didn't matter, as in you missed it, you can't go back and go get it.
Yeah. Sometimes there's a little bit of that. We give ourselves a little wish fulfillment. Like, I know I could have done it. I know I had it in me to get it done. I just didn't that time. I wish I did. So maybe I'll show myself getting it. and just feel good about
Yeah,
that.
it would have been nice to get it. So in the dream, I got the bonus.
Yeah.
Even though I can't go back and get it in the real world.
Yeah, or the kind of double layer thing of like wish fulfillment in a sense, but also reassurance of self-confidence in terms of this is something you are capable of. This one time is not indicative of a complete inability to succeed in this type of way. I think there's very much something there. It's like, yeah, and in the video game context of, because they are structured to be winnable. I mean, I don't know of any games where, well, there's been a couple where the meta narrative of the game was you can't win this. And that's supposed to be the game, that experience of not being able to win. But most games, for the purpose that we like to win games and challenge ourselves, in order for it to be a challenge, it can't be impossible. Impossible things are not a challenge. They're just impossible. A challenge should be, I got to gain skill. I need to practice. And then you get to the end. So I was going somewhere with that. Well, what do you think? Are there elements of the dream that you wanted to go back and look at again because they remain mysterious, or not sure their context in the broader, bigger picture? What do you think?
My question is why. I'm a bit curious why I was able to feel the controller, and like feel that I was holding something as one person, but then not feel anything as the other. That sort of was weird to me.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, this gets to, are you trying to get back up in my lap? He wants up, he wants down, he wants to go outside. What is happening with this guy? Would you just sit? Would you just sit down? Say again?
All kinds of energy. He has all kinds of energy.
I know.
He's a zoomy boy.
He's like, I got a good night's sleep. It's time to play. Let's go. Let's do this. We're going to play. We'll play in just a minute. He's got a little, these little fuzzy lamb chop dolls. We buy him. I mean, the audience can't see, my frame stops here. You can see in the corner over here is, some of his pile of he wants us to throw his babies in. He's playing fetch. He just wants to play fetch.
Yeah.
Okay. The idea of sensation in dreams. So you've probably noticed, and it's a very commonly understood phenomenon, that most people describe visual images in dreams. The next most common thing to describe is sound, visual visions, and visual and auditory phenomenon. The most rare forms of sensation in dreams are touch and smell and something else. What the hell is the fifth sense? Sight,
Taste.
sound. Say again.
Taste.
Yeah, gustatory. Extremely rare. Tastes and smells really at the bottom, and taste and smell are very connected.
I've never actually had a smell in a dream.
Say again. Sorry.
Never actually had a smell in a dream.
Right.
I've had taste, but only taste of water.
Interesting. Yeah. And I mean, these things are all as real as seeing something in your dream. We're not really seeing anything. We're having the imagination that we see something. And that changes too, based from person to person, and how they are able to conjure imagery in their mind. There's a kind of a famous, I don't know if you've heard of it lately, the NPC test with the apple. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
You ask some people, they see the full high res golden apple or red. Maybe it's got some streaks in it. And, oh, look, there's a wormhole, and you can actually kind of turn it upside down, and you can see yourself plucking it off a tree. The vivid imagination. You go down the scale, and, people see less and less, and some people see nothing. And I don't know if they dream at all. I would be fascinated to look into that a little bit more. Because I think you have to have that capacity for imagination in order to have an imaginative experience. That stopped me from just thinking about that. It's fascinating. I was going somewhere with that. Sorry. Sensations. You're not actually seeing anything. You're having the imagination of seeing it conjured from other, past visuals from life and exemplars. You're also describing a phenomenon of a kind of a dual personality experience in a sense. So it's not at all surprising that part of you is the player with the controller, and you're having this tactile sense of the controller in your hand, probably a very strong memory from younger days or even yesterday. Who knows if you're still playing games, but you know what a controller feels like in your hand. That's a very strong impression. So probably that imagery is iconic to your mind of this is how you know you are the player in this scenario, is the tactile controller in the hand feeling. So it's giving you that as an indicator of a change status.
Yeah, because I've seen people play video games, and I've played video games, and the tactileness is the difference.
Yeah,
that makes sense
for sure. And then it's telling you, okay, when that sensation goes away, this is how you know you are engaging from the narrator perspective.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and we do that to ourselves as well. We are ourselves playing the game of life, and we are the self that observes our physical body and thoughts interacting with the world. That's that magic gap between the pyramid and the flame. This is why I believe that we cannot possibly be something that is purely physical. Like it's just random neurons and they were programmed from birth and it's all stimulus and response. I can't buy it. I at the very least, it appears we have free will and we have to behave as if that is true. You can make choices. You can make different choices. There is responsibility for actions, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I have my own theory on it, but that would be an hour-long conversation in and of itself.
Do you lean more on the mechanistic side or not so much?
I lean on the I have a theory that you have two people inside you. One is your right brain, the other is the left brain. And
sure.
In most people, they communicate nearly flawlessly, but to a certain extent, they're still different. And so they talk to each other, and sometimes they do it in ways that are not the most easy to explain.
Sure. Yeah, and actually, I believe this is a theory you came to all on your own, self-generated. It is also a theory that had been proposed of how the brain works some 200 years ago, the dual brain left-right hemisphere theory, because they found out that it was separate halves connected by the corpus callosum, and we're like, well, then we must have two brains, literally one half and another half. In a sense, that is true. We do. There's a holdover from that. I mean, now we have more of a sense of left brain, right brain sharing some of the same areas, both sides at once processing frontal cortex decision-making stuff, both sides responding, but there's also discrete areas that only exist on one side, not the other
they both share the same, they both share the same information, but they react to it differently. Almost.
Sure. Yeah. And a lot of this is theoretical constructs. It's a fascinating thing I got from one of the books. So if you look into it, you're familiar with the phrenology, like the shape of your skull and your facial features determine character and behavior traits, that theory?
I've heard of it. I haven't put too much research into it.
Yeah, it's been pretty thoroughly discredited in terms of how close or far apart your eyes are doesn't make you a criminal or not. How sharp your nose is, whether you're, the space between your chin and your nose, none of this is fucking stupid. But the original theory of phrenology proved to be true with modern technology, that there are discrete areas of the brain that control different functions, consciousness. We have long since proven that was absolutely correct, but phrenology gets a bad rap because of all the facial features and bumps on the head nonsense that never made any sense. They thought they could see the results of different areas of the brain being more or less developed in the shape of the skull. It doesn't work that way at all. But the theory of discrete areas of the brain that process physical sensations, control motor responses. The idea of the brainstem is keeping us breathing and our heart beating while we're unconscious. We don't have to do it consciously. That was all absolutely true. I was going somewhere with that. Phrenology, areas of the brain. I don't know. Maybe it was just a cool story. Hopefully people cared to hear about that. That's what I'm getting from doing all this historical dream literature stuff. But you got to go, right? Actually, we're running up on the clock for you.
Yeah, I gotta get going.
Yeah, I can talk to anybody for hours. So we'll wrap it up though. If you feel like you got a decent answer to what that dream is likely trying to tell you about your situation and how you see yourself in it, living it.
Yeah, that was very informative. Thank you for having this conversation with me. Hopefully it was enjoyable for you and everyone else.
Yep. This is honestly evergreen content. Someone could be watching this right now, 20 years from the day it was recorded, and it's still a fascinating exploration of a mystery and looking for the logical connections to something real that kind of explains why it might have happened. But no, and I appreciate you being here and willing to, come on camera and it's just to tell folks it's not scary talking to me. If Rand didn't want to, you would never see this. But assuming it's online, he's given permission to put it up. So let me do my housekeeping real quick. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. I'm talking to you. Come on in, talk to me. T-shirt, coffee mug, BenjaminTheDreamWizard.com, 15 works of historical dream literature. And we'll just say once again to Rand, thank you for being here. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and experiences with me. I had fun.
I had fun as well. Hopefully I can watch this video a couple years from now and be doing the jobs that I want to do.
Yeah. And hopefully this experience in somewhat small way, it is my genuine wish, contributes to making that more possible for you. I'm sure it already is, but give you a little boost. If anything I did helps, there's nothing better for me. So
yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And everybody out there listening, thanks for listening.